Metropolitan Orlando TSMO meeting. I will call the meeting to order. My name is Lee Pullum, and I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting is in person. It is important for all TSMO members to attend our meetings in person. So all committee members are asked to be present in the Metropolitan Orlando boardroom for us to have a quorum. Members of the public will still be able to participate virtually, and we encourage them to do so. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public attending in person who want to speak need to fill out a comment card and give it to Rachel. Those attending on Zoom who want to speak can use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. We also accept comments by email and phone message before the meeting. Before I recognize Eric for the agenda meeting, I want to thank our vice chair, Christina Colon, for chairing the meeting for me in May. I don't believe she is here today. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Eric Hill, Metropolitan Orlando staff, for an agenda review.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning, members in the room and those online. I only have a couple announcements this morning. Our MTP public meeting will be held at the Orange County Multicultural Center in Pine Hills on the evening of September the 29th. So if you look ahead on your calendars and your schedules, if you could put that in, the time will be determined a little bit later, but we'll certainly get you a word on the time. But again, if you can put that on your calendars, we greatly appreciate that. Our office will be closed on July 4th in observance of Independence Day. And Madam Chairwoman, you mentioned our vice chair. She's not with us this morning, but Osseo County is being represented by Aaron Torres, who's taking the place, filling in for Christina. And also Arturo Perez is representing Tony Nelson from Seminole County. And then we have a new member, Cleet Sonier from the city of Winter Springs is joining us for the first time this morning. So that's all that I have, Madam Chairwoman, and I'd like to move on to our safety moment this morning on teen driving. Initially it was Adriana Rodriguez, but this doesn't look like Adriana. Looks more like Mike Wilson to me.
You may be right. Yes, I'm the usual face up here, but we wanted to have Adriana to cover Teen Driving Month because she has a teen who just started driving, and we'll cover a little more of that. So teen driver crashes, as we always do, starting off with some of the data. Fatal crashes have increased 10% since pre-COVID. The key things that we've seen increase-wise has been speeding and aggressive driving, especially in the past year, and an increase in teens not wearing belts who are involved in crashes. The Teen Safe Driving Coalition, that's an FDOT safety coalition, says that Orange County has the highest number of serious crashes involving teen drivers. Fortunately, the state has just beefed up the laws for driving education. New law that will go into effect next month will require teens who are 15 to 17 to complete a state-approved driver education course before getting their learner's permit. Previously, they just had to learn the laws and substance abuse. Now it's a more comprehensive course, and the Florida Virtual School will be offering, already offers, course, that's the type of course online. That Teen Safe Driving Coalition that I mentioned, they're leading all the statewide efforts, doing things such as the Battle of the Belts seatbelt campaign. And they also mail out a teen driving guide to all the parents of teens who've just received a learner's permit or a new license. But in addition to the basic course, 42 of the counties across the state offer a teen driver challenge, a supplemental course, which gets into defensive driving techniques, has both a classroom and practical components to it. You can see the students out there on the big driving course where they learn a variety of more advanced driving skills. And that was the course that Adriana's son recently took, and had good things to say about it, like typical teen, was not real excited about it going into it, but really appreciated it afterward. So this is run by the Florida Sheriff's Association, and it's been around since about 2007. And like I said, this is a supplemental course. It can provide a benefit for insurance, reduced prices depending on the carrier. It's open to students 15 to 19 who have a valid learner's permit or operator's license. And so, it's a really valuable program, and it's available in all three of our counties here. And you don't have to go to the county that you live in. You can go wherever there's space available. We've got a short video to say a little more about the Teen Driver Challenge.
Let's face it, driving in Orlando can be scary, even more so if you're new behind the wheel. That's why the Orange County Sheriff's Office has a class designed for teen drivers to get them more comfortable on the road. The Sheriff's Office, in partnership with the Florida Sheriff's Association, recently launched the Teen Driver Challenge in Orange County.
It's a program that's designed to assist teen drivers with learning a little more about responsible driving, defensive driving, good driving habits and practices that'll help keep them alive on the road.
The course, which is open to drivers between ages 15 and 19, is a mix of classroom learning and hands-on experience. The goal? Reducing the chances of teens being involved in a crash.
Kids love getting their permit, and then they get their car and their freedom. It's fun, but at the same time, we want you to be safe, we want you to be smart, and always keep your eyes on the road. The 8-hour course starts in the classroom, where the teens first learn the do's and don'ts of staying safe on the road. Then it's outside, where instructors walk the teens around the vehicles, letting them check the tire pressure and inspect what's under the hood.
That 4,000-pound vehicle that they're driving can become a very dangerous object if they don't care for it the way they should.
Now that the cars are checked, the teens are brought out here to the driving pad, and they're paired with a certified driving instructor. Teens get to test their driving skills, cornering, backing up, emergency braking, and skid recovery.
You get to make the mistakes that you usually wouldn't be able to, and then figure out how you would get out of those situations. So that's pretty cool.
The teens aren't graded on their skills, so there's no failing this course, but they are provided feedback and given tips on how to be better drivers.
It gives us an opportunity to show them some good habits and keep the community safe and keep our teens safe, which in turn keeps the road safer and all the community members as well.
To get more information on the Teen Driver Challenge, including how to sign up for the course, go to ocso.com/teendriver. Oh, and in case you were wondering, there is no parallel parking test. For the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I'm John Busdecker.
All right, and that concludes our safety moment this morning. Be happy to take any questions. All right.
Okay, so today we have no agency reports. So we will move on to roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can remind members to please remember to use their microphones. Barden,
Here.
Crandell for Barchessa,
Here.
Brock,
Here.
Torres for Cologne,
Here.
De La Chaise,
Here.
Ide,
Present.
Elisar, Elliott Moore,
Here.
Gomez, Horn,
Here.
Quinn,
Here.
Jameson,
Here.
Krug,
Here.
Mendenhall,
Here.
Perez for Nelson,
Here.
Price,
Here.
Pullum, Ramdat, Sadler,
Present.
Sanders,
Here.
Saunier,
Present.
Senerans, Singh, Smith, Wetzel,
Here.
Martello for Williams,
Here.
Yeager,
Present.
Yeargain.
Here.
Madam Chair, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. We will now hear public comments on the action items. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a public comment?
No comments received.
Okay. Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
None received.
None. Okay. So we have 3 action items today. Members making or seconding a motion, please state your name and remember to use your microphone. Okay, our first one of your agenda packets. Are there any corrections to the minutes? It has been, if none, it has been properly, okay, so now, sorry. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Motion to second?
Price.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Same sign? Nope. Okay. So we are, move on to the next one. Okay. Our second action item is staff's request for approval of the TIP. More information can be found in section 2 of your agenda packet. We will hear from Mr. Jason Sartorio of Metroplan Orlando, who will tell us more about this item. Mr. Sartorio, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. This morning I'll be presenting the fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2030 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, draft for adoption. And as was mentioned, some additional information is located in section 2 of your agendas. As you all know, the TIP identifies all federal and state funded transportation projects within our region over the next 5 years. It includes a couple sections for informational purposes only, and the TIP is updated on an annual basis, with the 5th year of funding being consistent with the adopted prioritized project list, which was adopted in July of 2024. The TIP is broken down into several sections that are on the right side of the screen. Of most important is the 11 sections, which kind of sort how projects are displayed within the TIP. The TIP also includes an abbreviations and acronyms guide, as well as a systems performance report. And within the TIP, we have a total of 552 projects with approximately $11.7 billion in funding. So as you can see, we have a lot going on in the region over the next 5 years. We have a total of 271 federal, state, or turnpike funded projects, and they has approximately $5.5 billion in funding over the next 5 years. This does not include the $1.3 billion in local funds that our partner agencies contribute to projects. And this also does not include projects submitted under the partner funded project section, which are for informational purposes only. And the pie chart on the left side of the screen breaks the funding down based off of the 11 sections that I mentioned. And should be noted that obviously I-4 makes up 49% of that pie chart. These funds do include the $2 billion in discretionary funding that we received through the governor's Moving Florida Forward initiative, which is why that section is slightly skewed more than usual. Within the TIP, we have a total of 39 projects that MetroPlan Orlando funds using our Transportation Management Agency or TMA funds. And that comes to approximately 145 million in funding over the next 5 years. This does not include the 31 million in TMA funds that were used for 3 state highway projects in order to help the state balance the work program. And that was an amendment that we approved earlier this year. And as you can see, the pie chart breaks this down, breaks the funding down by project type. So we have complete streets, bicycle and pedestrian, transit capital, and transportation systems management and operations. So since I came in front of you last time, we have a few changes to the TIP. We received the Central Florida Expressway Authority work plan, which added 168 projects, which is approximately 4.5 billion in funding. We also updated the project names and management agencies for a couple projects. And we also added 4 additional partner-funded projects. And then not on the screen, as of yesterday, we received a notification from FDOT that the Osceola truck parking site received a grant. So that funding is going to be added into the TIP that is going to be adopted. Sorry, forgot. Additionally, we received feedback from several agencies concerning the removal of federal carbon reduction funding from the TIP, and we have been in discussion with FDOT regarding if and when these funds will be added back into the TIP. While the public comment period is still open until July 7th, we do have a summary of comments that we received to date. We received feedback regarding Sunrail expansion, funding for the Shingle Creek Trail, signage for slower drivers to move over, and regarding the convenience of Lynx transportation services for senior citizens. In addition, we received several comments regarding prioritizing and advancing projects along Mitchell Hammock Road in Oviedo. And we also received a suggestion to conduct a study on the feasibility of adding light rail in the center median of Mitchell Hammock Road. To date, we have hosted 2 virtual TIP Ask a Planner sessions, as well as 1 TIP open house, and that was at the Seminole County Public Library in Oviedo last week. I've received some great public feedback through this event, including some of the following. I received feedback that the State Road 50 widening in the eastern part of Orange County is much needed. We received feedback that there's a real desire to reduce traffic congestion through the increase of public transportation, through both the expansion of Sunrail locally as well as Brightline to Tampa. We also received feedback that there's a desire for safety for all users, especially bicycle and pedestrians, as well as new drivers. And there should be wider sidewalks on Mitchell Hammock Road in Oviedo. As I mentioned earlier, you have some additional information on the action in section 2 of your agenda packets. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
This might be a question for you, maybe a question for Alex. When I looked at the funding equity between federal and state funds, it seemed like the federal funds did hit the mark of distributing the equity between the 3 regions. However, the state funding didn't appear to have the same distributions. That didn't quite meet the mark. Is there something, maybe a large project that kind of skewed that distribution? Just maybe you can help me understand that.
I'll let Alex hop up here.
Yeah, I'll say what's important to acknowledge, and I have requested the fair share report from the Florida Department, from FDOT District 5, which looks 5 years back, 5 years forward, which is probably a better instrument kind of to look at kind of the fair share or kind of, equity or funding distribution back to jurisdictions. So I can't tell you one specific project, but we have requested that as well. As it relates to, as you mentioned, with the TMA, kind of NPO specific funds, we do a really, attempt to do a really good job balancing those amongst the partners. FDOT, as they're weighing in delivering some of the bigger projects across the state, sometimes that requires a longer window, a bigger window than a 5-year picture. But I'll come back to you with more information on that as soon as we have it.
Very good, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. It has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Madam Chair, we haven't had a motion in a second yet, if you can,
Oh,
thank you.
oh, sorry.
I move to approve the tip, Shatsman.
Okay, is there a motion to approve? I'm sorry. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you. All those. Is there any discussion? Nope. It has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye again.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Same sign. Yep, okay. Our, okay, our third action item is staff's request for approval of the PPL. More information can be found in section 3 of your agenda. We will hear from Mr. Slade Downs of Metroplan Orlando, who will tell us more about this item.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. As you just mentioned, be bringing back the final version of this year's update to the prioritized project list. So at your last meeting, I brought the first preview version to you in the common presentation section, but was really looking for feedback during that time and definitely had a lot of you write in and provide that feedback. So thank you for everyone who did. But a bit of background on the PPL for anyone that may have missed the common presentations. It is one of our core products. So we have the MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is our 25-year plan, where it really includes all of our visioning and scenarios and kind of wish list items for the region over the next 25 years. Then we have the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, which Jason just touched on. It's the 5 years, from now of projects that have money allocated to them. And then the prioritized project list is kind of the bridge between the two. It's the 10 years following the TIP. It's projects that do not have money allocated yet, but it's kind of like the on deck circle for, okay, you're coming up in the queue. Let's make sure that we get our ducks in a row so that when the money becomes available, we can get those projects going. So that is how the PPL fits into kind of our series of plans at MetroPlan. Touching on the feedback that we received, really for the most part, we received minor changes to cost estimates and project limits, really basically minor changes on the whole. Kind of the long and short of it is that no projects received any change in project ranking because that prioritization is set in the MTP. So the order of projects remains the same. One request that we did get, one exception to that, is we received a project segmentation request. So there is a project on 1792 in the city of Winter Park. It's from Nottingham Street to Monroe Street, basically the city limits of 1792 for the extent that it's within the city of Winter Park. We talked with the city. They're requesting that it be phased out into 3 options. One being the intersection of Fairbanks, State Road 426, and then the other 2 phases being the northern portion and then the southern portion of that project. Ordinarily, even though this is within one jurisdiction, it does touch up against several others. So we wanted to bring it to the group to, allow for that discussion if any of those partners or any of our other partners had any thoughts on that project. Otherwise, we can go ahead and incorporate that change if there's no issue with this body. And with that, actually, before we move on to motion, wanted to open up for that discussion. Just check the pulse of the group.
Was there a reasoning from Winter Park with separating them out, or?
Yes,
Yeah, I can defer to Charles on that, actually.
Yes, it was all one project and it was broken in two to try to make it more achievable. But looking at the construction related inflation and the challenges with doing the two segments seemed to be still a need to break it further. That intersection and the approaches are the worst are the worst performing approaches in the city of Winter Park, and the access I-4 to the west. And it's just a big challenge for us, the city of Winter Park. It makes it very difficult to traverse Winter Park. There are also some right-of-way considerations that we thought of. We believe this project needs to get going on the right-of-way acquisition, and the city of Winter Park, to help all of this on State Road 426, has acquired a considerable amount of right-of-way immediately to the east. The left turn movements going eastbound here on 426 can take you 3 or 4 cycles to get through because of the constraints that we have there. And so there is severe congestion, and I believe there needs to be more time added to pedestrian phases through here. To do that, we need to get the additional lanes through this intersection and build the additional lanes on the right-of-way on the state road for which the city of Winter Park has acquired right-of-way. So I'd like to get that going first. Then looking at the other two segments, it just looks like a very heavy lift to do the blue and the one south of the red. Doesn't look quite like red to me, but
Didn't quite read.
I understand what you mean. It looks like a very heavy lift to get those two done at the same time after the intersection is done. So just trying to show some progress. Otherwise, this project could tumble further and further along down the road because of the difficulty in getting it done cost-wise and right-of-way wise. So those are the general themes. And City of Winter Park, again, I reiterate, has gone ahead and acquired significant right-of-way on 426 to the east to try to facilitate that first phase that we're asking it to be broken out into.
Just one other question, is the sequencing plan then from Winter Park, the green, blue, then red?
Green, blue, then red, yes.
Right.
Slade, I've got a general question on just procedurally, when you break up a project like this, and does that go back and you guys look at prioritization, because now these are separate and different projects?
So it's kind of a good time, a good timing point for this to happen, because since we will be adopting the new MTP at the end of this year, we're going to do a refresh of the prioritization process in general. So it's kind of like,
jump in.
Yeah, no, Slade hit it on the head there. So this project's not funded so this is on the prioritized project list, designs wrapping up, right of way required for this one. So there's nothing in the work program in the TIP relating to construction. So as Slade mentioned, as we go into the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the state highway system list is reconsidered for that process, this phasing would be incorporated in that. And that's why we're bringing it here today. Would it be reprioritized in the shuffle under our current process? No, it would remain, just at the top of the list in segmented pieces as it was originally prioritized. This is also on the state highway system. So this request needs to be coordinated with DOT. You know, it is a city request with intent in logic, but that is something that, you know, as we're advancing the project, it's different than a lap priority where you guys segment it and we move forward. This one's going to require a little more coordination and cooperation. But given the cost increase on this particular one and many of the state highway system projects, as Charles articulated, they want to start chipping away at the project. But as it relates to reshuffling it in whole, you know, in your role as technical advisory committee members, that's where we kind of lean on you on how you'd want to approach that as we come up with the cost feasible plan for the state highway system. Taylor will be talking about that a little later. That's where you'll see some of these projects shown for construction funding. But as it relates to the current TIP, there is no construction funds for this one. So it's a ripe opportunity to reconsider the implementation of the project.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. I'm still figuring out the machine that's been created that prioritizes all this stuff. So I was just seeing if hopefully there's not a penalty for breaking up a project because you've gone into, you know, maybe different segments. So that was of interest to me. So appreciate that explanation.
Question. And Alex might answer, but maybe, you know, on the trip, is there any movement or any more new information or anything with what's happening with that?
So we received some information earlier this week, and I can't cover it in full detail. Maybe John can provide a little information afterwards. The legislature has removed TRIP funding as a transportation funding source. So a lot more to come. Hasn't been signed by the governor just yet. But as it relates to TRIP funds in the work program, those will likely be removed and having to be rebalanced. And then as it relates to our TRIP priority list, if there's no fund to apply for, we'll likely not need a priority list accordingly. But again, that has not been approved signed by the governor just yet. So as we're advancing our processes, we are going to move forward accordingly. And once that's signed into law, we may need to kind of go back and amend both the TIP and also the priority list accordingly. But we'll do that once it becomes formalized.
Thank you for the update. Sure. I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, thanks. So with that, I'd like to request a motion. Well,
Okay.
ask the chair.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the prioritized project
Okay.
list.
Is there a second?
Could I ask the chair to amend the motion to approve as presented to include that project segmentation?
Oh, include the project segmentation also.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gotta be parliamentarian sometimes.
Is there a second?
Second. Pardon.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, it has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one presentation today. The presentation this morning is a briefing on the 2050 MTP's ongoing activities and next steps. The presentation will focus on the second iteration of the MTP funding scenarios. The second iteration funding scenarios and the monthly status report are provided under section 4. Ms. Laurent, you have the floor.
Thank you and good morning. So today we're going to be following up on our discussion from last month where we were briefly talking about those funding buckets and revisiting that MPO funding process and that funding policy for this year. So from all of the conversations that we've been having this year, we've updated those illustrative funding scenarios based on the consensus that we've built to date and curated 4 new draft funding scenarios that are included in your agenda packets under section 4 for you to look at as we talk through things today. But these are designed to mostly be very similar for the items that we have consensus on. And then these are curated to be able to easily compare these small remaining differences for the final details that we're trying to button up here through this June-July committee meeting cycle. There are individual one-pagers for each of these scenarios, so you can look at them in detail. But there are also, towards the very end of section 4 of your agenda packets, some comparative summary handouts where you can look at all 4 of these scenarios on the same screen, both in terms of funding allocation per modal category, as well as looking at an estimated annual output from each of these scenarios. So as I ask you some questions today to get your feedback on these drafts, you'll be able to quickly and easily see the information that you need to help inform your decisions today. So as I've mentioned, these funding buckets, they keep coming back. A good example of what Slade was just talking about, and Alex as well, with that Winter Park project, that is on our state highway system needs list from 2045. I anticipate it will still be there for the 2050 plan. I say anticipate because I don't have that list in front of me to officially confirm right now, but I believe it is there. So that particular project, as well as other improvements, similar roadway widenings, urban corridor improvements, all of those fall under the federal and state funds for the state highway system, big red bucket that we've got on the screen today. But the funding policy that we're talking about is limited to that third bucket on the screen and only applies to the federal funds for MPO priorities. So this is about $34 million per year estimated for the next several years. So with that, I do have a couple questions for you today to help us differentiate between our 4 remaining scenarios to see what your thoughts are and be able to button up these final details. So I have one primary question for you, and then we'll see how many of the others we want to get to this morning. I'm going to ask the question, open it up for group discussion on your thoughts about yes or no, and potentially why, if you'd like to share that. And then I'll ask for you for a poll. For those who want to say yes to the question, I'll ask that you turn your placards vertically so I can quickly count them across the room. And if you would indicate no, leave your placards where they are horizontally on the table. And we'll move through the first question. That's primarily for you guys about ITS here today for that. And then we'll revisit the next set of questions. But are there any questions or comments about how we're going to move through this polling today? Nope. Okay, then we'll dive right in. So the primary question that we wanted to make sure to ask you today, and for those on our technical workshop group, these questions will look fairly familiar, but we want to make sure that they come through this formal process. From our April technical workshop, there was a desire to see increased funding and allocation of funding to technology and intelligent transportation systems. So this is one of those final details we're trying to get a yes or no on. Should a ITS funding set aside be included within the NPO funding policy? So that would be a boxed fund under the TSMO modal category. So there would not be any changes to that TSMO modal category funding allocation. What we would be saying is a certain amount of money must be used for ITS improvements if that restriction is put into place, or should the funding be used more generally for all TSMO improvements based on their prioritization following the standard process that we've done, being a little more fluid in terms of that process. So yes would be to include that restriction and include that ITS set aside, that dedicated fund for those project types, or no would be to continue with a more flexible process. So do we have any questions, comments, ideas that we want to share together? Or we're ready to poll immediately? Okay, well, not hearing anything, if you would say yes to include that restriction, to have that set aside for ITS funds, please place your placards vertically. And I'll go through and do a count around the room, which is going to be really easy for me this morning. Okay. Thank you very much for your feedback on that one. We do. Did you what? All right. we're welcome all thoughts and opinions. I'm trying to ask the questions so we can have the discussion. So thank you very much. All right, so the other questions are items that I want to kind of do a quick pulse check on this one. We are going to be discussing these exact same questions during the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, and I know many of us are on both of these committees. So we can run through them twice, having the discussion here and again during TAC, or we can save these for the TAC meeting. So I would leave that up to our chair. Do we want to run through these 4 questions as well, or save them for TAC? Because we made it through the primary question that we had for TSMO this morning.
Okay.
Do you want to discuss these?
Pardon?
Do you want her to discuss these as well?
Yeah. Is there any discussion?
So, Madam Chairwoman, the question is, would we like Taylor to have some discussion on these polling questions now?
Oh, rather than waiting for the TAC meeting?
Correct.
Well, okay, I guess the question is are you guys gonna, how many of the people here are gonna wait for the TAC, attend the TAC meeting? Are you gonna give this presentation at the beginning?
It's a TAC only presentation since I'm up
Right.
here twice. So it'll be towards the end of the TAC meeting. Mhm.
Okay.
Twice.
Huh?
So it doesn't hurt us behind on time.
Okay. So I think we should go ahead and.
All right, we'll run
and
through
go
them,
over them.
okay.
Yeah.
Then we can do that. We've got them all up here on the slide, but these are going to be still yes, no questions. If at any point you would like me to repeat the answers, since the answer options, let me know. But our very first question here, should we continue to maintain a set aside for our high injury network countermeasure projects, or should they be recategorized within other project categories? So if you're looking at your handouts, the comparative summaries, this is the difference between the safety set aside scenario where there is a dedicated source of funding to move forward with those high injury network projects more expeditiously than if they were recategorized within various other modal categories. And that high injury network countermeasure category would not be included in the funding policy. So the question I'll be asking this morning is, yes, do we want to maintain that high injury network countermeasure category within the funding policy? Or no, should that be removed and the high injury network projects that have been identified be recategorized through other areas of the policy? Does anyone have any questions about the answer options? Or any discussion? Or we're starting to pull already? Okay. I want to pause and have that open up for discussion, just in case.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions, so.
I think those are good.
Okay.
It's a vote.
I'm not seeing any hands raised just to indicate there's questions or items we want to discuss.
wanna
So
vote?
we'll go ahead and poll. If you'd like to say yes to maintain that high injury network countermeasure category, please place your placards vertically. Otherwise, leave them on the
I
table.
have a
where
question,
they are.
actually.
Yes.
So how, can you talk about the prioritization if it stays in the high injury network part versus being included in a project? Can you just maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So if the projects stay in that high injury network category, that is a dedicated funding category to be able to move those projects forward, regardless of what type of improvement it is, because it is a safety countermeasure needed more expeditiously than other projects. We do include safety as a prioritization measure for all of our projects.
Right.
So that's still included for every project, regardless of where it's located within the 2050 MTP. If these same projects were to be recategorized and say we move a complete streets project from that high injury network countermeasure list to the complete streets list, that means it has to wait until we finish the projects that have already begun or that we're in the midst of doing. Design's funded and construction needs to be funded first, so we can finish what we've started. Then we can start those high injury network countermeasure projects when they next come up in the list. So it's more of a delayed start for those high injury network projects if they were to be recategorized.
Perfect. Thank you.
Another question?
Just out of curiosity, what's the total amount of funding that would be dedicated to this out of all of our funding?
So that if you take a look in section 4 of your agenda packets, there is the second to last handout of scenario comparisons. So as we're looking at each of our 4 different scenarios today, there are 4 different percentage allocations, with the recategorizing safety being 0 because that category would not exist under that scenario. But for the others, it ranges from 15 to 26% of those $34 million that we were talking about.
So of this bucket for the high energy network countermeasures, are we saying that that would be, looking at this, 26%? Is that what this is saying?
For this particular safety set aside scenario, yes, we're saying that that would be potentially 26% of that funding
Okay, so a quarter of all the funding would be for this one thing.
under the scenario,
Okay.
yes. Any other questions? All right, we're ready to poll then. So if you would say yes to maintaining the high injury network countermeasure category, please place your placards vertically. Otherwise, leave them horizontal on the table, and I will see if I can count today. There we go. Okay, so I counted 15. Write that one down. Okay. Second question. Go ahead and place your placards back horizontally, just in case you don't want to count them as yeses for the next question. So this is another nuance question coming into our active transportation category. So we've already had multiple discussions about this throughout the year and built consensus around including a school mobility program, which is what allows the MPO to be able to assist with cost overages on FDOT Safe Routes to School projects. So that is going to be included in all of our funding scenarios. So that's not the question. But under the active transportation category, there are other funds left available outside of that school mobility program. This is about those other funds. So for the rest of the funds under active transportation, should those be restricted to only be allowable to be used on regional trail projects? Or should they be left as unrestricted and allowed for the use of all active transportation improvements? This was a question that came up from the summit and some later discussions about wanting to see a priority for regional trail projects being funded through the MPO process. So we're asking that as a question to you all. Yes, should that restriction be in place? Or no, should those funds be unrestricted and allowable for use for all active transportation improvements? I'd like to open up for any discussion or questions to clarify what I'm asking of you this morning.
Question.
Yes.
Just for clarity, then if it was left open, what other kind of projects would be in there? Would we be thinking of?
So that would be standard active transportation, bicycle and pedestrian type improvements, bike lanes, sidewalks, trails, crossing improvements, similar to what we've
that
seen.
aren't designated as regional.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, then we'll go ahead and do the poll. So if you would like to have that restriction in place for the remaining active transportation funds to only be used for regional trail projects, please place your placards vertically. Otherwise, leave them horizontally on the table. Thank you. All right, going on to question 3 then. Again, sticking with that active transportation question, but this is about the school mobility program's definition itself. So for those on our technical workshop group, you'll remember this discussion that we had. The school mobility program, again, is there to allow us to assist with those FDOT Safe Routes to School projects if and when project cost overages occur, so that those projects can continue forward. But we're asking, should that program be expanded to also include areas of hazardous walking conditions? Or should we have that as a separate program itself? So that hazardous walking conditions element would allow the MPO to initiate sidewalk improvement projects around schools where there are hazardous walking conditions, rather than waiting for the FDOT Safe Routes money to be allocated to a project. It would allow us to help expand those limits, cover cost overages, or initiate a project on behalf of our partners as well. So this is more of a nuanced question. Should this be one overall overarching program that covers school mobility and hazardous walking conditions? Or should they be two separate boxes under that active transportation category? From the technical workshop discussions, the recommendation was to have that as a single program for ease of use and implementation over the next 5 years. But I want to ask your thoughts about that this morning as well. So are there any questions or items that we want to discuss before we do any polling?
Question. So the Safe Routes to School funding box, is that does that fund get used up pretty much every cycle, or is there a balance remaining?
I can't speak to the FDOT Safe Routes to School program, but in terms of the school mobility program, we have that funding set aside for when and if those project cost overages occur. If there are none in any particular year, those funds are reallocated to cover other project cost overages that do occur. We try to maintain those around schools and for sidewalk and active transportation improvements where possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? We're ready to poll. We'll just dive right in. So if you would like to see these two items, the school mobility program and hazardous walking conditions as a single program within the 2050 MTP, please raise your placards vertically. Otherwise, if you'd prefer to see those as two separate line items under active transportation, leave your placards horizontally on the table. Right, I'll wait a little bit. Everyone's thinking about this one today. Okay. Thank you very much. So then last question of the morning, well, we've talked about this one a lot as well, starting back in January of this year, and this is about widening and new roadway construction projects. And this has been requested to keep coming back up, was specifically requested by our MPO board that we continue this discussion through this round of meetings as well. So we're asking formally, should the MPO funding within our area be allowable to used for widening and new roadway construction through the addition of a new category within the funding policy? And for those looking at your handouts, that would be the widening new corridor category funding scenario on the far right-hand side of the full handout page. So should that be an allowable expense for MPO funds? Or should those projects primarily be addressed through those state funding opportunities, that red first really big bucket that we were talking about earlier today? Or should it come out of the MPO blue bucket that we had on the screen a little bit ago? Do we have any questions or comments that we'd like to make about this particular topic of discussion before we poll? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and poll, and I will say our technical workshop participants did recommend to say no to this particular item because they wanted to see state funds be leveraged for those widening and new corridor projects and see the MPO funding used for other multimodal improvements. But let me ask you, what are your thoughts this morning? If you say yes to include the widening and new corridor category, please place your placards vertically. Otherwise, if you prefer to see those projects funded through other funding opportunities, then leave your placards horizontally on the table. I can count that as an extra frowny face no on my notes. Yes. All right. Thank you very much for your feedback. And I'm putting that extra frowny face just for you, my friend, on my notes. Okay, so with all of that, going through all of these questions today, I can do a little bit more on this slide. So kind of quickly going through with the yeses and nos, we were kind of doing a knockdown exercise of which scenario remains standing based on the yeses and nos. And based on what I'm seeing for all 5 questions, it seems like this group is in support of the safety set aside scenario. How do we feel about that? Any questions or comments or items that we want to discuss? I see one. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, just because again, maybe I don't just thinking about like the funding, like with the set aside funds, to create these other little boxes. Like how is that going to create more difficulty to access those funds if we're doing a project that might include something that's outside that very specific requirement? Is it going to keep us from being able to access the funds for the project or rather do something different? Like really, is this going to make it more difficult to do a project versus, having those in a general fund to be able to do these things?
Based on the way that we prioritize projects, and we went through several discussions about that throughout the last quarter of 2024, we have a multi-criteria analysis to be able to make sure that the right projects are bubbling to the top of our needs lists. In terms of how quickly they get addressed, that's where the funding policy has been very helpful to us. In terms of how things are historically prioritized, it's really difficult for a sidewalk improvement project to compete against a multimodal complete streets project. So to create a little more fairness in how these different projects are compared against each other, that's where these different modal categories came from. And Alex, if I'm mischaracterizing that from before I worked here, let me know. But that was a way to be able to make sure that multiple project types were being advanced a little more fairly, and we were keeping that multimodal focus throughout the region. So as we look at these particular modal categories, we want to continue to make sure that we're investing diversely throughout the region in the types of transportation improvements that we're doing. But we can talk about and focus in on what those percentages can be. So that's part of the scenario comparison process that we've been doing throughout this year to make sure that we're dialing in on not only the right categories and the definitions of those to make sure the right projects are associated with each category, but that we feel comfortable with what the percentage allocations to each of those modes has been. So if there are any questions or comments about those percentages, knowing that in terms of definitions and structure, based on the feedback today, we like the safety set aside scenario. And that has been supported both by the CAC on Wednesday, MAC yesterday, and our MTP technical workshop participants a few weeks ago. So I'm liking to see this consensus in terms of structure, but I'm open to feedback and comments on those percentages as well.
I've got some feedback. So let me help me understand this. So we're talking about safety versus high injury network prioritization. Is that what we're talking about? Is that what we?
So there's two different elements. So right now, all we're talking about is the amount of funding per modal category. Prioritization of the projects and the order in which they're addressed, that was an entirely separate process.
No, the things that we just polled on.
That was about the existence of a high injury network modal category funding projects.
Versus safety.
That is, so that particular category was originally named safety improvements and created a little bit of confusion in terms of what that was trying to accomplish. So that safety category was renamed to make it more clear about the types of improvements that were going to be implemented.
Maybe if you go back to the slide where the 4 options and we voted on those options, and the very first one, is this what we're talking about? The high injury network versus the recategorization?
Yes.
Okay, so
between those two, basically the two options that you're seeing on the slide, blue was where that high injury network countermeasure was included. You see that 26% of funding allocated to.
So when you counted the votes, we voted not to prioritize the high injury network. Is that what I'm hearing?
You voted to yes, to keep a high injury network category in the funding policy to advance those projects forward.
Okay, so that passed.
Yes.
Okay.
That was.
I'm happy. So,
based on my count, that was 15 yeses.
Flipped. But thank
So
you
just
for
to
that
provide clarity, I think,
clarification.
and Taylor's hitting on this. So we asked some knockdown exercise here, and which led us to the safety set aside. If you would have said no, let's just recategorize those safety projects, you would have probably leaned more to that yellow recategorizing safety. Similarly with the ITS discussion, did you want to box some ITS tech money? No, which kind of leads us back to the safety set aside, keeping the TSMO category more broad. Same thing with widening. So hope that's clear as we prioritize. Again, as Taylor mentioned, safety is a prioritization factor no matter the category. The high injury set aside is going to pull from projects that were identified as part of the regional, as well as the county and municipal Vision Zero action plan. So this is going to be a seed fund to start advancing those infrastructure countermeasures that were identified in each of your municipal plans. So hoping we can get those initiated sooner than later.
Thanks for that clarification. It just surprised me that that was even a question, because we spent so much time developing Vision Zero, Target Zero, and then for some reason this comes up as even a question to us, which was kind of out there. So I'm glad we move forward.
And I know this, and I'll end on this. And I know we talked about this a little bit, at the last technical workshop. Why are you guys asking these questions again? Why are you asking me about widening? Didn't we already talk about this? And as we're going through a consensus building exercise, we're getting really strong feedback here. But as we look to our other advisory groups and members of the public, and even our board for some matter, there's still some participants in our process who are on the fence asking for more questions. So in our due diligence as staff, not jumping to conclusions, even though we have our own our own ideas, we want to make sure this is, of the group, in the will of that. So some of these conversations may feel ad nauseum, but we want to make sure as we're moving forward with a funding policy that should sustain us for the next, 5 to 10 years, that we have consensus and everyone knows what we're getting into. And even some of your questions that you just asked, Brian, really help make sure that there's clarity in what the policy will actually allow for. Just the one other addition to Adam's question, the rigor of the application, it's all about the same. All projects will, all federal transportation management area funded projects are going to have to go through the LAP, the DOT local agency program, the LAP process. So the intake, what Metro Plan Orlando asks of you or what DOT asks from you is basically the same. It's our way of managing a transportation portfolio to accomplish a variety of different things that hit on the different goals and objectives of the long range plan.
It comes down to, for me, we can go back to the other questions there for like those specific boxed funds for like the work or like the school transit, whatever, walkable, stuff like that. I was just trying to make sure that if we're doing a project that, let's say it would fall into that category to use that box fund, and then saying something in that project is just outside of that for that category, would that all of a sudden make that project not feasible through that? Or would we still be able to use it, but then have to use some other funding source? I'm just trying to figure out, does that box fund make projects harder to do because there's always something else that might be necessary that might not fit within that specific requirement?
I'll let Taylor add, but I would say our needs assessment really sorted through that. What are the projects? What's the type? What's the description? What's the work mix? And then we found proper categorization. As we get into fund code, fund mix, once projects get programmed, that's where we have to have a better understanding of the design for funding eligibility. There will always be a local match, not a match, but there will always be a local, funding requirement for LAP projects based on ineligible expenses of that matter. But as it relates to the funds that the blue bucket, the TMA funds that we're using, they're extremely flexible as it relates to project types. Our SU, our urban attributable funds, extremely flexible. We do have transportation alternative funds. They show up in the tip as TALU. Those are a little more restrictive. They can typically only be used for like sidewalk or trail improvements. But as my team is developing the tip and working with DOT, that's where we're, we kind of call it Heinz 57, where you're kind of mixing and matching fund codes based on the work description to accomplish the project. But the great majority of our funds, we'll call it, 30 of the 34 that we receive on any given year are those very flexible funds. So we can accomplish our board's priorities, but they all have to be implemented through that LAP process. So that's something that we like to ensure that we're emphasizing is, to access these funds, there is a very rigid process that has to be followed.
Thank you, Alex. Any other questions?
I know the percentages are still being worked, but I'd like to just see if we could look at the active transportation, because to go from what we were doing at 17% to 8, seems like we're cutting a lot, where we might be able to pull a couple percentages from some of the other categories and maybe push that up. Because I just feel like then it's gonna hit a lot of those active transportation projects will be pushed aside.
All right, thank you. Okay, well then in terms of next steps, we're not done yet. That's why this wasn't an official vote or action item today. This is more polling to kind of help us build consensus on the funding policy that we're developing for the 2050 MTP. So we will be asking these same questions again during our TAC meeting today. So I will do my best to characterize the flavor of this conversation for our new attendees, but please share your thoughts there as well. We will be asking these questions to the reporting on the results of these polls to the board at their meeting in 2 weeks to kind of get a final yes, no, which direction are we headed in. So at your next meeting in late August, we can bring to you the application of this funding policy. We'll be able to see all 4 of those fund types within the draft cost feasible plan for the 2050 MTP and see the application of this funding policy that we were curating today applied to that blue bucket of funds for those MPO TMA funds. So with that, we are nearing the end of our MTP development process. So we will be done talking about this eventually. We're getting there. You'll see that draft cost feasible plan at your next meeting in late August. Eric mentioned our public meeting that we're going to be having for the MTP in late September. And then we'll be working towards the adoption of the 2050 in December of this year. So we're getting close to the end of this process. So thank you for your feedback and thoughts all along the way. But are there any other final questions or comments or items that you'd like to share with me and the MTP team? All right.
Okay, are there no more questions for Ms. Laurent? Okay, thank you. We have one common presentation with the TAC meeting, and it is a TAC only presentation. For those who are available, we encourage you to stay for the TAC meeting to view the presentations. Presentation is on the recent FDOT Advanced Air Mobility Workshops. TAC Chair Lenny Barden and Metroplan Orlando staff will lead group discussions seeking feedback from TAC members on advanced air mobility and reflections from the recent local government workshops.
Madam Chair, if I may, the TAC chair reminded me this morning that they will not be speaking on that. But it is, you'll be facilitating it, and the discussion will be led by Jack Cologne, who's with the City of Orlando.
Okay.
Just for clarification.
Okay, thank you. So there are several items in the general information section of our agenda packet for your review under section 5. There's a list of upcoming meetings in your agenda, and some noticeable meetings are the Metroplan Orlando Board will meet on July 9th. And the next TSMO meeting will be on August 22nd, 2025 at our normal meeting time of 8:30.
And Madam Chair, another note. Mr. Smith reminded me that for engineers, the ITE meeting, annual meeting is in August, from the 10th to the 13th. And I know we sent out information last month on that. But again, Mr. Smith was good enough to remind me. So I just wanted to raise that again.
Okay,
Thank
you.
And early registration ends today, so. Just to add that. It gets more expensive if
So you will
wait
pay
after
more
today.
if you do
Correct.
not register today.
No, not yet, but I need to do that then today. Thank you, Charles.
Okay.
Doesn't come to Orlando very often, so it's a good opportunity for anybody who wants to go get some technical stuff, see some presentations. They're going to a lot of different places too, so it's a lot of stuff in there.
Okay. Are there any final comments from members? Yes. Mr. Brock.
I know we're not the only ones that applied for an SS4A grant, but I just wanted to publicly thank FDOT, Seminole County, Petroplan Orlando, and Lynx for providing support for the project. So we can't do this project without you. If it gets approved, fingers crossed.
Anyone else? Okay, we have our final public comments opportunity. If any members of the public wish to comment, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic after you are recognized. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised online.
Do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a public comment?
No comments received.
Okay. Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. So at this time, if there are no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.